his polluted consciousness, which is now attached to material enjoyment, in very serious devotional service with detachment. Thus, his mind and consciousness will be under full control. Very important verse. Purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. The process of liberation is very nicely explained in this verse. The cause of one's becoming conditioned by material nature is his thinking himself the enjoyer, the proprietor, or the friend of all living entities. This false thinking is a result of contemplation on sense enjoyment. And when one thinks that he is the best friend to his countrymen, to society, or to humanity, and he engages in various nationalistic, philanthropic, and altruistic activities, all that is just so much concentration on sense gratification. The so-called national leader or humanist does not serve everyone. He serves his senses only. That is a fact. But the conditioned soul cannot understand this because he's bewildered by the spell of material nature. It is therefore recommended in this verse that one engage very seriously in the devotional service of the Lord. This means that uh, this means that one should not think that he is the proprietor, benefactor, friend, or enjoyer. He should always be cognizant that the real enjoyer is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the basic principle of Bhakti Yoga. One must be firmly convinced of these three principles. One should always think that Krishna is the proprietor, Krishna is the enjoyer, and Krishna is the friend. Not only should he understand these principles himself, but he should try to convince others and propagate Krishna consciousness. As soon as one engages in such serious devotional service of the Lord, naturally the propensity to falsely claim lordship over material nature disappears. That detachment is called vairagya. Instead of being absorbed in so-called material lordship, one engages in Krishna consciousness. That is control of consciousness. The yoga process necessitates controlling the senses. Yoga, indriya samyama, since the senses are always active, their activities should be engaged in devotional service. One cannot stop their activities. If one wants to artificially stop the activities of the senses, his attempt will be a failure. Even the great yogi Vishwamrita, who was trying to control his senses by the yoga process, fell victim to the beauty of Menaka. There are many such instances. Unless one's mind and consciousness are fully engaged in devotional service, there is always the opportunity for the mind to become occupied with desires for sense gratification. One particular point mentioned in this verse is very significant. It is said here, prasaktam asaktam pati. The mind is always attracted by asat, the temporary material existence. Because we have been associated with material nature since time immemorial, we have become accustomed to our attachment to this temporary material nature. The mind has to be fixed at the eternal lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindaya. One has to fix the mind at the lotus feet of Krishna. Then everything will be very nice. Thus, the seriousness of Bhakti Yoga is stressed in this verse. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Ram, Ram, Hare Krishna Mahamantra Ki Jai. So, Canto 3, chapter 27, verse or text number 5 is a very important verse. If one is interested in becoming liberated from the process of birth and death. So the verse says, it is the duty of every conditioned soul to engage his polluted consciousness, which is now attached to material enjoyment, in very serious devotional service with detachment. Thus, his mind and consciousness will be under full control. Okay, so, and then in the purport it said, the process of liberation is very nicely explained in this verse. Canto 3, chapter 27, verse number, or text number 5. The cause of one's becoming conditioned by material nature is his thinking himself the enjoyer, the proprietor, or the friend of all living entities. This false thinking is a result of contemplation on sense enjoyment. When one thinks that he is the best friend to his countrymen, to society, or to humanity, and he engages in various nationalistic, philanthropic, and altruistic activities, all that is just so much concentration on sense gratification. Well, this is very important statements. The so-called national leader or humanist does not serve everyone. He serves his senses only. That is a fact. But the conditioned soul cannot understand this because he's bewildered by the spell of material nature. It is therefore recommended in this verse that one engage very seriously in the devotional service of the Lord. This means that one should not think that he is the proprietor, benefactor, friend, or enjoyer. Okay, I'll stop right there. This is basically confidential knowledge, but it's an open secret to those who have the ears to hear. Now, everybody's got ears, but not necessary ears to hear transcendental knowledge. Dogs have ears, and cows have ears, and they have big ears, right? Now, our cows have very big ears, and all kinds of living entities have ears, but they're not necessarily capable of understanding spiritual knowledge. Only someone who who's lost the infatuation of sense gratification and now is able to transfer his ability to meditate on Krishna and Krishna conscious activities. Such a person is what you would call a genuine devotee. So that's why it says here that it is therefore recommended in this verse that one engage very seriously in the devotional service of the Lord. This means that one should not think that he is the proprietor, benefactor, friend, or enjoyer. He should always be cognizant that the real enjoyer is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the basic principle of Bhakti Yoga. One must be firmly convinced of these three principles. One should always think that Krishna is the proprietor, Krishna is the enjoyer, and Krishna is the friend. Let's say best friend. Not only should he understand these principles himself, but he should try to convince others and propagate Krishna consciousness. Well, there it is, the best formula for being and remaining Krishna conscious. Okay, so these three principles, what are they? One must be firmly convinced of these three principles. One should always think that Krishna is the proprietor, Krishna is the enjoyer, and Krishna is the friend. Not only should he understand these principles himself, but he should try to convince others and propagate Krishna consciousness. It's very nice how Prabhupada makes everything crystal clear. His, any doubts that a person has can be erased by regularly hearing Prabhupada's wonderful purports and explanations to the verses. And in his purports, he makes everything crystal clear. You don't have to speculate, you don't have to guess. You simply have to follow Srila Prabhupada's instructions. That makes life very easy and pleasure and full of pleasure and happiness because you're no longer guessing, you're no longer speculating. You have on a golden plate the supreme spiritual knowledge for making spiritual advancement, uh, becoming a genuine devotee. Now, that's a very rare thing. Most people never reach that level of commitment to spiritual life. And but if one does become serious about spiritual life, about as it says here, he understands three principles. One should always think that Krishna is the proprietor. Number two, Krishna is the enjoyer. And number three, Krishna is the best friend or the friend. Not only should he understand these principles himself, but he should try to convince others and propagate Krishna consciousness. So here Prabhupada makes preaching very simple and direct. You just have to understand Krishna is the proprietor, Krishna is the enjoyer, and Krishna is the best friend. In proprietor, enjoyer, and best friend. And now all we have to do is convince people of that. And it's not hard to convince them because it's the truth. Something is hard to convince people when it's not the truth or it's the half truth. But when something is the complete truth, it's very simple. It's not complicated. Krishna is the proprietor. Krishna is the enjoyer, meaning proprietor of everything. He owns everything. Krishna is the enjoyer, the supreme enjoyer, and we should not act as the supreme enjoyer. We should all be surrendered to the Lord and offer everything to the Lord. And Krishna is the best friend. Nobody, well, obviously, he's in our heart. He's the closest person to us. And he knows everything that we're doing and everything that we're not doing. So we should be very careful to understand that there's a silent person in our heart observing us, and that is Krishna. And he's trying to see, or he's waiting to see our determination to be Krishna conscious. And if we're not Krishna conscious, if we're going deeper and deeper into sense gratification, he's the witness of it. And he might try and help the devotee, but the devotee was adamant. Then Krishna throws his hands and arms up in the air and says, well, I tried my best, but the devotee is so obstinate. He wants to have sense gratification. What can I do? So then we no longer have what would be called the intimate advice of the Lord because we don't want to hear it. So hearing is the best way to learn. hearing from bona fide devotees, then we will learn the truth. So we should have that taste for regular hearing and regular chanting and regular taking of prasadam. You do those three things every day, and like in the morning, the afternoon, and the evening, then you'll be purified. This purification process is by hearing from bona fide authorities. So there are two, let's say, ultimate principles: Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, hearing and repeating about Krishna. Shravanam, Krishna, Shravanam, Kirtanam, Vishnu, Smaranam, and then remembering. So if we're always hearing and then repeating, then we'll be able to remember Krishna consciousness, knowledge, who is Krishna, and who am I really? I'm the eternal servant of Krishna. And we keep that in their mind, and they are uh, cognizant every day of this uh, real position that we are the eternal servant. We are not God. We are the eternal servant of the Lord. And how do we show that? By being engaged in the eternal spiritual service of the Lord. And then every day when we wake up, we know who we are, right? Uh, we are the eternal servant of the Lord, and we should be engaged in devotional service to the Lord every day, chanting and uh, always hearing. Um, this hearing process is the way to be educated properly, hearing from a bona fide devotee. The most bona fide devotee, of course, is Srila Prabhupada, and we're very fortunate. We have more than 3,000 tapes of Prabhupada's lectures. Actually, there's more, but there's 3,000, that are available very easily. And we should take advantage of that and hear Prabhupada every day. Uh, if there was a tape of Jesus preaching, how much you think that tape would cost? Millions of dollars. But we have thousands of tapes of Prabhupada, you see. And I mean, obviously Jesus is a pure devotee, but Prabhupada is a genuine, uh, let's say, pure devotee on the highest level. And we have thousands of tapes of this, right? And books and so forth. So we should immerse ourselves in always hearing and chanting about the glories of Krishna from Srila Prabhupada. That way we will not be misled. Okay, that's why every day we read the purports of Srila Prabhupada, which are his ecstasies. He said that my purports are my ecstasy. So, and then when you hear Prabhupada's purports, and you realize, oh, he's making everything really simple for me. All I have to do is follow what he says. And it's not complicated, right? It's not like some very, very convoluted and complicated philosophy. It's very simple. We are all the eternal servants of Krishna, and Krishna is the supreme personality of Godhead. And engaging in devotional service is the perfection of spiritual life. There you go. Three still simple statements. And or else here it says also that uh, the process of liberation is very nicely explained in this verse. The cause of one's becoming conditioned by material nature is his thinking himself the enjoyer, the proprietor, or the friend of all living entities. This false thinking is a result of contemplation on sense enjoyment. When one thinks that he is uh, that he is the best friend to his countrymen, to society, or to humanity, and he engages in various nationalistic, philanthropic, and altruistic activities. All that is just so much concentration on sense gratification. Wow. He just eliminated all the politicians and other people who have all these false ideas about who they are. The so called national leader of the conditioned soul cannot understand this because he is bewildered by the spell of material nature. It is therefore recommended in this verse that one engage very sincerely in the devotional service of the Lord. This means that one should not think that he is the proprietor, benefactor, friend, or enjoyer. So proprietor means the owner. Benefactor means the person that is should be given all respect or all, let's say, benefits. Friend or enjoyer. Wait a minute. Benefactor actually means that he's the one giving the most mercy. Let's put it like that. Yeah. Look up the word benefactor. He's the one that's giving the benefits to others. So he's the proprietor and the benefactor.
Mhm.
So he owns and he's giving mercy to others.
Benefactor is someone who provides help, support, or financial assistance to a person or a group or organization, often for charitable purposes. Benefactors are typically recognized for their generosity and contributions, who may be in the form of which may be in the form of donations, endowments, or sponsorships.
Yeah, so here it says that it is therefore recommended in this verse that one engage very seriously in the devotional service of the Lord. This means that he should not think that he is the proprietor, benefactor, and friend or enjoyer. He should always be cognizant that the real enjoyer is Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That is the basic principle of Bhakti Yoga. Okay, that's our takeaway today. One must be firmly convinced of these three principles. One should always think that Krishna is the proprietor, Krishna is the enjoyer, and Krishna is the friend. Not only should he understand these principles himself, but he should try to convince others and propagate Krishna consciousness. So, Krishna is the proprietor, Krishna is the enjoyer, and Krishna is the best friend. That's pretty easy. If we just understand those three things and explain that to others, we become a very good preacher. And therefore, Prabhupada says, as soon as one engages in such serious devotional service of the Lord, naturally the propensity to falsely claim lordship over material nature disappears. Okay, and how is that? By engaging in serious devotional service of Krishna. The detachment is called vairagya. Instead of being absorbed in so-called material lordship, one engages in Krishna consciousness. That is control of consciousness. The yoga process necessitates controlling the senses. Yoga indriya samyama. Since the senses are always active, their activities should be engaged in devotional service. One cannot stop their activities. If one wants to artificially stop the activities of the senses, his attempt will be a failure. So meditator, the meditators, silent meditators that sit in a dark closet or in uh, in a remote place and just sit down and meditate, they're not actually advanced devotees. They're advanced in tapasya, but not in actual love and, let's say, service to Krishna. So here Prabhupada clearly says, since the senses are always active, their activities should be engaged in devotional service. One cannot stop their activities. Very important statement. Instead of trying to stop the activities of the senses, one should engage the activities of the senses in Krishna consciousness. If one wants to artificially stop activities of the senses, his attempt will be a failure. Even the great yogi Vishwamrita, who was trying to control his senses by the yoga process, fell victim to the beauty of Minaka. There are many such instances. Unless one's mind and consciousness are fully engaged in devotional service, there is always the opportunity for the mind to become occupied with desires for sense gratification. One particular point mentioned in this verse is very significant. It is said here, prasaktam asatam pati. The mind is always attracted by asat, the temporary material existence, because we have been associated with material nature since time immemorial. We have become accustomed to our attachment to this temporary material nature. The mind has to be fixed at the eternal lotus feet of the Supreme Lord. Savai Mana Krishna Padara Vindayo. One has to fix the mind at the lotus feet of Krishna. Then everything will be very nice. I like that. Everything will be very nice. Thus, the seriousness of bhakti yoga is stressed in this verse. There you go. You want to solve all problems of life, just engage in bhakti yoga with love and devotion for Krishna. Thus, the seriousness of bhakti yoga is stressed in this verse. Yeah, we shouldn't think that it's just some kind of mundane activity. It's very serious, and it should be engaged in seriously to please the Lord. That's the whole idea of bhakti yoga, how to please the Lord, not how to please myself. So you see how basically it's not difficult to understand Krishna. It's instead of pleasing ourselves, we act completely to please Krishna. The pleasing is there, but instead of pleasing our own false ego, now we're pleasing Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So we don't stop pleasing, we just choose the right person to please. That is called education. Okay? When we know who the right person is to please, and we actually engage in acts of pleasing of the Lord, that's real knowledge. It's not simply theoretical. Theoretically, we can know what the truth is, but unless we're engaged in the truth, we'll never actually be liberated. So knowledge itself is not enough for liberation. You have to have knowledge and devotion for the Lord. That means you put your knowledge into active devotional service. Now you have a chance of being liberated from the cycle of birth and death. So therefore it says, Savai Mana Krishna Pradara Vindayo. One has to fix the mind at the lotus feet of Krishna. Well, when you're meditating on the lotus feet of Krishna, well, first of all, you're recognizing your position to be subordinate and surrendered to the Lord. And you do not try to emulate the Lord, try and become equal or greater than the Lord. We're always subordinate. That's why we have to fix the mind at the lotus feet of the Lord. Then everything will be very nice. Thus, the seriousness of Bhakti Yoga is stressed in this verse. Hare Krishna, Hare
Hare
Krishna,
Krishna,
Krishna
Krishna
Krishna,
Krishna,
Hare
Hare
Hare. Hare Rama, Hare
Hare
Rama, Rama
Rama.
Rama, Hare. Are there any questions?
So this is the Sankhya Yoga by Kapila Muni, and this verse is direct, statement that Bhakti Yoga ne Tivrena Viraktyacha Nayed Vasham. I mean, even just looking at the verse, clearly Kapila Muni establishes Bhakti Yoga is the essence of Sankhya philosophy. But then the other Kapila completely took this Sankhya Yoga and made it atheistic.
Well, that's why Prabhupada has written these extensive purports so that we can understand what the actual truth is.
Mhm.
So we shouldn't read any other book. All books, every book wants to limit you in one way or another. So when you see a book, you should understand by reading that book, it's going to limit you in some way. So the best limitation is to be always engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. That's what you're going to learn from the Bhagavad Gita. But when you read other books, so it'll limit you to just be a mundane sense gratifier, or limit you to be a member of some organization of welfare, or some organization of violence. So, in other words, every book is limiting. So, if you're limited to be a devotee, that's good. But if you're limited to be in anything else, that's not good. So, but a book will limit you. It'll say, do this, don't do that. Every book is like that. So the Bible says, thou shalt not kill. It's telling you what you should not do. Right? It's limiting you. But when we're limited to be Krishna conscious and to love Krishna unlimitedly, that's the correct situation. Loving Krishna unlimitedly is the real purpose of life. So, yes, on one hand, we have to be limited, give up sense gratification, and the curious mind who wants to know what is this, what is that, rather than having that mind that's going from one thing to another, it should be limited to Krishna consciousness. But Krishna consciousness encompasses everything. So you're not really limited, right? But you're limited from sense gratification, but you're unlimitedly engaged in devotional service. So this is, it seems to be contrary, but actually it's the truth. We should be limited or refrain from sense gratification, but we should be engaged always in Krishna's service with the help of bona fide guru and gurus. Okay, so once we agree to follow the rules and regulations of Krishna consciousness, we are limited, right? We'll do things that we never did before. But this type of limitation liberates you from the cycle of birth and death. So by accepting this type of liberation, you are eternally liberated. In other words, you're no longer subject to birth, death, old age, and disease. So this is a good type of liberation or limitation. You're limited in sense gratification. In other words, you give it up completely, and you're uh, unlimitedly engaged in the devotional service of the Lord. All this is hard to understand, especially for people who are seeking sense gratification. But if you really want liberation, then you have to surrender. And that seems to be an oxymoron. How can you be liberated by surrendering to the Lord? Well, that is the mystery of spiritual life. That when you surrender yourself to Krishna, you're actually liberated from birth, death, old age, and disease, and sense gratification. So this type of surrender is positive. Other types of surrender, most of them are negative. If you surrender yourself to the flag of the United States, it doesn't sound good, but it's not really that good, right? What benefit is there by surrendering yourself to a flag? Rather, you should surrender yourself to Krishna, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, and be always engaged in His service. Now, that has some real serious meaning. Right? Surrendering to the flag, like every morning in some schools, they have the
Flag hoisting.
flag what?
Flag hoisting, right?
Yeah, and sometimes they give a salute to the flag or whatever. But we want to surrender every day, every minute of life, every second of life to Krishna. That means that we're really, let's say, surrendered. Surrendering to Maya, that's not a good thing. Maya is going to take you away from Krishna. Surrendering to Krishna, that's the right thing. Then we come closer and closer to Krishna. So there's different types of surrendering. Surrendering to Maya takes you away from Krishna. Surrendering to Krishna takes you closer and closer to Krishna. So that's the right surrender. Okay, so in this text 5, uh, one should always think that Krishna is the proprietor, Krishna is the enjoyer, and Krishna is the friend. Not only should he understand these principles, but he should try to convince others and propagate Krishna consciousness. So, if you want to be a good preacher, there's only these three things that you have to emphasize. Krishna is the proprietor, Krishna is the enjoyer, and Krishna is the friend.
That's the essence of the last verse of the 5th chapter. Bhuktaram
Bhaktaram Yagyatapasam Sarvalokam.
Suhridam.
Yeah. Krishna is the proprietor, Krishna is the enjoyer, and Krishna is the friend. That's pretty simple. Proprietor, enjoyer, friend. Right? Best friend, actually. So these are, one must be firmly convinced of these three principles. One should always think that Krishna is the proprietor. Nothing belongs to me. Everything belongs to Krishna. And Krishna is the enjoyer. So I should not try to be the enjoyer. I should be the server of the Lord, who is the enjoyer. And Krishna is the best friend. Yeah, nobody's closer to you than Krishna, because Krishna is in our heart with us all the time. So he's the proprietor, the enjoyer, and the best friend. Not only should we understand these principles, but we should try to convince others and propagate Krishna consciousness. So, Krishna is the proprietor, Krishna is the enjoyer, and Krishna is the best friend. That's pretty simple philosophy. It's not complicated. So it's not difficult to preach in Krishna consciousness. It's pretty easy. You don't have to be a PhD to preach Krishna consciousness. He just have to say Krishna is the proprietor, Krishna is the enjoyer, and Krishna is the best friend. So three simple principles, and if we propagate these three principles, people can become Krishna conscious and very easily. Krishna is the proprietor, he's the enjoyer, and is the best friend. As soon as one engages in such serious devotional service to the Lord, naturally the propensity to falsely claim lordship over material nature disappears. That detachment is called vairagya. Instead of being absorbed in so-called material lordship, one engages in Krishna consciousness, that is, control of consciousness. The yoga process necessitates controlling the senses. Yoga indriya samyama. Since the senses are always active, their activities should be engaged in devotional service. One cannot stop their activities. If one wants to artificially stop the activities of the senses, which is what the Mayavadis are trying to do, his attempt will be a failure. Yeah, well, look at Vishwamitra. He was such a powerful meditator, right? But still he fell down. So we have to follow Srila Prabhupada's instructions here, which are Krishna's instructions. Since the senses are always active, their activities should be engaged in devotional service. One cannot stop their activities. If one wants to artificially stop the activities of the senses, his attempt will be a failure. So all these silent meditators, they're all going to be failures. It's not going to be able to stop the activity of the mind and the senses. But if they engage the mind and the senses in Krishna's service, that they can do with success. So why try and do something that's impossible to achieve? All these so-called yoga meditators, it's all a waste of time. It's not making them more spiritually advanced. It's simply increasing their false ego.
Mm.
The opposite of what they want to achieve. You know. So they think that this, 1 hour a day or 2 hours a day or 3 hours a day of meditation, that they've made spiritual advancement. No, they haven't advanced at all. Because at the slightest opportunity for sense gratification, they can fall down. Just like there was one great meditator, he was meditating underwater.
Shobari.
Shobari, yeah. And one day underwater, a school of fish came by close to him, and they were engaging in sex for procreation, and it agitated his mind, broke his meditation. He had to scramble up to the surface of the water, otherwise he would die. And then he went out looking for women, and he married a whole bunch of women, not just one woman, a whole bunch of them. Right? So much for this, meditating underwater for 100 years. It doesn't mean that you're actually making spiritual advancement. Spiritual advancement is when you're actively engaged in devotional service with your mind and senses always focused on pleasing Krishna. Now you're making real progress. So there's different concepts of how one can progress in spiritual life. Obviously, someone who is engaged in tapasya, some level of progress in spiritual life. But you have demons who are also uh, controlling their senses and doing severe tapasya. Does that mean that they're highly advanced devotees? Not necessarily. There are people that engage in severe tapasya in order to kill someone or in order to invade a country. And so it's not necessary just because they're meditating or they're engaging in severe tapasya doesn't mean that it's the right thing. Everything depends on what our motive is. So someone can take up serious meditation in order to kill someone. Wow. That type of tapasya is not really spiritual. But if we meditate on Krishna, and then what's the best meditation? The silent meditation is not the best meditation. The best meditation is being always engaged in the service of Krishna and always preaching the glorification of Krishna. That means we're active. It's not that we're inactive. This inactive, silent meditation, well, that doesn't help anybody, right? It doesn't really help the person who's doing it either, because at the opportunity for sense gratification, they can fall down because they're falsely trying to control the senses. The best way to control the senses is to keep them always engaged in devotional service. Now you're also meditating on Krishna. You're also meditating, but it's active meditation, not this silent meditation. So the active meditation on Krishna will liberate you. The silent meditation will lead you to a dead end. So have you ever come to a dead end?
In the roads.
Yeah, you can't go anymore. That's what that silent meditation leads you to, a dead end. And then you have to rethink things. After spending years and years of severe tapasya, now you have to rethink things. And maybe I did the wrong thing.
And then the modern society has come up with a new phrase called mindfulness, which is same thing, basically controlling somewhat of your senses and focus to do more sense
Good things.
gratification, this is more corporates pushing so that they can get more productivity out of the employees.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And they even pay for some of these programs.
For meditation.
Yes.
Yeah. But that's not meditation. That's just faking it for sense gratification.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, there's the real thing and there's the false thing. So we should always be on the side of the real thing, meditating on Krishna by being engaged every day in the service of Krishna. That's real. This silent meditation, trying to meditate on nothing or on just one thing, like the tip of your nose. How much spiritual advancement can you make like that? Your nose is not Krishna. It's the body. It's one part of the body. So that's body meditation, which is nonsense. This nose meditation is nonsense. Or trying to meditate on nothingness. That's also nonsense. So it's not really, going to help you spiritually. It'll stop you from engaging in gross spiritual activity, but it won't stop you from subtle material activity. And I just made a mistake. It's not going to help you from gross material uh, let's say, activity. As, but the silent meditation, let's say you put yourself in a closet, you close your eyes and you meditate, it's not really going to liberate you. It's going to simply stop you for a certain period of time, but it's not going to free you from desires. Desires are always going to be there. Now, if you have spiritual desires, then you become liberated. And if you have material desires, no matter how much you meditate, you'll never be liberated from the cycle of birth and death. So, Subari, he meditated underwater for so long that he had barnacles. He had like things growing on his skin from being underwater for so long, right? But still, one day a school of fish were close to him, and they were engaging in sex, and it broke his meditation. And then he had to scramble up to the surface of the water, and then he tried to right away go and find some women and marry them. And he married more than one woman. He married a whole bunch of women. And so all that meditation underwater that he did, and all that tapasya, zero. It was not permanent. It was just a temporary effort to control his senses. You don't control the senses really by silent meditation. You do control the senses by engaging them in active devotional service. Yeah. So what the Mayavadis want to do is control the senses by stopping thought and activity. But that can't be done continually. Eventually they'll speak or they'll say something, right? However, you can be always meditating on Krishna by proactively talking about the glories of the Lord and engaging in the devotional service of the Lord. That's real yoga. That's real renunciation. That's real silence. You're not speaking. Real silence is when you don't speak any nonsense. You only talk about Krishna. That is real silence. Haribol. All glories to Srila Prabhupada ki jai. So, are there any questions or comments
Hare Krishna.
on this fifth text or the fifth verse? Actually, it's a very nice verse. And just listen to this. It's very, very interesting what it says. It is the duty of every conditioned soul to engage his polluted consciousness, which is now attached to material enjoyment, in very serious devotional service with detachment. Thus, his mind and consciousness will be under full control. That's a nice verse. Very, very nice. The duty of every conditioned soul is to engage his polluted consciousness, which is now attached to material enjoyment, in very serious devotional service with detachment.
Yeah, the key word is also serious.
Yes, very serious.
Brain.
Tivrena. Bhakti Yogena Tivrena. Yes. Thus his mind and consciousness will be under full control. Let's meditate on this all day today. Wonderful verse. Atta eva sanais chitam prasaktam asatam pati. Bhakti yogena tivrena virakya cha nayet vasam. So this tivrena, very serious. What kind? For seriousness, bhakti yogena, by devotional service, by very serious devotional service, and viraktya, without attachment, then he can bring the mind under control. Haribol. Yes.
Here the word detachment.
Yeah.
So detachment from body relationship and attachment to Krishna, is that the meaning of this detachment? Yeah. It says render the devotional service with detachment.
Detachment from Maya, attachment to Krishna. So attachment to Krishna is detachment from Maya. So it sounds like it's how can you be detached if you're attached? Well, being attached to Krishna means you're detached.
Very serious devotional service with detachment.
Yeah. But the detachment is active service to Krishna. So it might not seem to be detachment.
Or the silent part.
Yeah. Not the inactive part. And one becomes very active, much more active than before. Okay, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. Yay. Thank you very much.
Any questions, online clarifications?
Today's Friday.
Yes.
Nice.
So the takeaway is that one must firmly be convinced of these three principles. One should always think Krishna is the proprietor, Krishna is the enjoyer, and Krishna is the friend.
Yes. Yes.
And not only should he understand these principles himself, but also try to convince others and propagate Krishna consciousness. So,
Yes. The best service to the people in general is to awaken them to Krishna consciousness so that they may know that the supreme enjoyer, the supreme proprietor, and the supreme friend is Krishna. Then the illusory dream of lording it over material nature will vanish. Wow, fantastic statement by Prabhupada. And it says the best service to people. And then Prabhupada says we cannot be of any real benefit to the people in general. Why? Well, because our resources are limited. But the best service to the people in general is to awaken them to Krishna consciousness so that they may know that the supreme enjoyer, the supreme proprietor, and the supreme friend is Krishna. Then this illusory dream of lording it over material nature will vanish. So basically, what it's trying to tell us is what is the best service to humanity? That's to help them become Krishna conscious. So they know who the supreme enjoyer, supreme proprietor, and supreme friend is. It's Krishna. So there's so many people today engaged in different types of let's say efforts to serve humanity. But Prabhupada is saying there are an unlimited number of living entities, and our resources are limited. Therefore, we cannot be of any real benefit to the people in general. The best service to the people in general is to awaken them to Krishna consciousness so that they may know that the supreme enjoyer, the supreme proprietor, and the supreme friend is Krishna. then this illusory dream of lording it over material nature will vanish. Okay.
In both the purports, Prabhupada is putting stress on helping others. Here is awaken them, and in this today's verse is try to convince others, like preaching.
Yeah. So he says, arousing, if one makes friendship with Krishna, one will never be cheated, and he will get all help needed. Arousing this consciousness of the conditioned soul is the greatest service, not posing oneself as a great friend of another living entity. The power of friendship is limited. Although one claims to be a friend, he cannot be a friend unlimitedly. So, what is there that we can do? If we make friendship with Krishna, one will never be cheated and one will get all help needed. That's not like poetry. One will never be cheated and one will get all help needed.
It's a very positive statement. He will get all help needed.
Yes. Arousing this consciousness of the conditioned soul is the greatest service, not posing oneself as a great friend of another living entity. The power of friendship is limited. I like that statement. The power of friendship is limited. Although one claims to be a friend, he cannot be a friend unlimitedly. There are an unlimited number of living entities, and our resources are limited. Therefore, we cannot be of any real benefit to the people in general. The best service to the people in general is to awaken them to Krishna consciousness so that they may know that the supreme enjoyer, the supreme proprietor, and the supreme friend is Krishna. Right. Then this illusory dream of lording it over material nature will vanish. Okay, there you are. This is the best service to people. That's to awaken them to Krishna consciousness.
Haribo.
That's what we're trying to do. Haribo.
Looks like there are no raised hands online, so today's Friday, so we'll be at the temple, I think. Mostly.
What's that?
Today in the evening, we'll be at the temple. Friday, Saturday. So evening class won't be online.
Oh, okay.
There will be live from the temple.
In Spanish?
I think so.
Okay.
Yes.
Well, we'll get ourselves ready for that.
Haribo.
Thank you very much. All glory.